The Sunday Paper Review
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Dove Men Plus Care, proud sponsors of the British and Irish Lions. Upgrade to Dove Men Plus Care, because care changes everything.
Yes, it is Sunday, the 27th of July, 2025. It's All-Ireland football final day. You're welcome along to the Sunday Paper Review. It's royalty across the board for our guests on the papers today. Royalty from the press box in the shape of the author and broadcaster and writer, Clíona Foley. Clíona, welcome,
Good morning,
as
Adrian.
always. And royalty in the shape of Colm O'Rourke, two times All-Ireland winner, three-time All-Star, the man who you give a long introduction to, who needs no introduction at all. Colm, you're welcome. I think your first time on the papers.
Very first time.
And a very unusual All-Ireland final experience for you today, I suspect, given your activity there over the last 30, 40 years.
Yes, I suppose no commentary on anything, ability to go in nice and relax. I'm going to sit at the match with my wife and enjoy it all, take in everything. There was always a bit of pressure when you were doing the RTE Sunday game live. You know, you were trying to make sure you had all your ducks in a row. You were worried about the fact you might say something stupid, which of course we managed to do a lot. But it's a more relaxed atmosphere, something that I'm really looking forward to. And I'm looking forward to a brilliant game too, because it looks like the two very best teams have got there, and it's been such an exciting championship.
Yeah. I was going to say, are we guaranteed a belter? We're not really, are we? Like, anything could happen.
Well, we thought we were going to get that last Sunday as well, and look what happened. It turned out to be anything but in terms of the quality of players on view, in terms of the quality of games up to now, I'd be surprised if it's not a great game. The new rules have really liberated forwards, and we have seen David Clifford at his best, Oisin Gallen, Michael Murphy on the other side, Sean O'Shea. There's so many brilliant individuals playing that it's hard to see it not being a great game. Hopefully it doesn't rain and the ball is dry, and that we can have the perfect game and down to the last 5 minutes.
Given that history of like player, pundit, manager, and your first time in whatever number of years you said it was that you're going to be there now, a free spirit, I suppose. Do you ever see yourself been back there in a different environment again, or as a manager or a pundit? Or
you never say never, but like I think I said to you, it's about 55 years since I haven't either played or managed a team for a year, and I found this year very, very enjoyable. Like, I've been involved in club management almost all my time, or managing in school, or managing some teams since I stopped playing. So, like, not having to worry about where you are on Tuesday and Thursday and weekends, and being able to plan and off the cuff travel and do what I want. It's something that is
liberating,
quite engaging and liberating. But you know, I could see myself getting back maybe at underage football in the club. I think that's where I'll go back to.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll see how that pans out. We've lots to talk about the game. We'll do that over the course of the next hour and a bit. The Sunday Paper Review and Off the Ball brought to you by Dove Men Plus Care, proud partners of the British and Irish Lions. Upgrade to Dove Men Plus Care, because care changes everything. As always, we'll give you a bit of a sense of what's happening across the back pages before we get into it properly. And we're going to start with the Mail on Sunday. Fever pitch, Jim v Jack on the back page here. Donegal and Kerry peaking at the perfect time as they meet in a much anticipated final, writes Shane McGrath on the back page. Hugo Boss as Lions clinch series in the MCG thriller, it says on the Rugby. It's GA all the way for the Sunday Independent as well. A final for the ages. A renaissance season for football set to sign off with a masterpiece. The words of Dermot Crowe inside. And the Sunday Times have taken the controversial decision to go with the Rugby on the front page of their sports section. Not entirely, but certainly for the main photo splash. Lion Kings 26-29, last gasp try by Andy Farrell's side seals epic comeback and first series win for 12 years. And of course the battle for Sam Maguire and more of that inside. The Sunday Mirror, Clifford class, Fitzmaurice Kerry ace in the form of his life. Certainly seems to play with that bit of a free spirit. And Hugo the Lion King is the other headline on the top of the Mirror. The Sun goes with David and Goliath. Clifford ready to double up. Murphy's back for a second. Picture of they're going for the Clifford v Michael Murphy angle there. And pass. Will Hugo away out of that? It says in the top page.
They're stretching it this morning, Adrian.
And the People finally has a bit of football there. Arteta delighted 55 million Gyökeres signs a 5-year deal to join the Gunners. Hugo Boss and not a Gaelic football to be seen in sight. So yeah, we'll start with maybe the narratives around the game, like that sort of. You can see even from the sense of the papers there, it's either Clifford v Murphy or it's Jack v Jim, the two main narratives leading into
and
it.
it's like we've talked about this before, and it's funny. Colm has written a piece about this today in the Sunday Independent about how it's players who do the job in the end, not managers. But this final, and I hate the cult of the manager, but I do think this final is particularly fascinating because two of the smartest brains, and maybe Sean Boylan would be another one, that have ever managed Gaelic football, and particularly this developmental changing time of it, are up against one another today. So that is fascinating. For first, you have Jim and Jack, and they're pictured fever pitch right on the back of the Mail on Sunday, and understandably so, I think, in this one. But Shane McGrath, the first piece you come into the Mail on Sunday is Shane McGrath on, as that is a great headline as well, David and Goliath, and he has a brilliant. He says, Clifford at 26 in his prime, Murphy is almost a decade older. His brilliance in big games has to this point been episodic, like in the Thunder's closing minutes against Mayo, or first half a burst against Meath. Clifford's menace is constant, like a sheer drop, terrifying defenders who know that one misstep could swallow them and their dreams whole. It's a great summary, really.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely piece as well. And there's lots of pieces reflecting all week on these two individuals and what a colossus they are in the game.
And it's kind of impossible to know what the hell is going to happen in relation to all of that once the ball is thrown in.
Yes, it's difficult, but I would say that Jack O'Connor is very happy with the sort of coverage, and even in today's paper with numerous writers, most of the coverage is on Jim McGuinness. I mean, Jim McGuinness is the messiah. Joe Brawley, of course, would have been saying that constantly in his pieces. And I'd say it suits Jack O'Connor very well to come in under the radar. And in some ways, I think Jack O'Connor has won 5 All-Irelands as manager of Kerry.
Yeah, he's his eighth final.
Yeah, and Jim McGuinness has won 1. So, like, you would think that most of the emphasis should have been on Jack O'Connor and how he has been able to bring a succession of different Kerry teams to it. But I suppose Jim McGuinness's background and the fact that Donegal haven't been in too many All-Ireland finals means that there's a greater spotlight on him. But I've always been writing about Donegal for the last 10 years. I always thought they were very much underachievers, but because they had brilliant players, and it's taken McGuinness again to come and sort of solidify them and give them a purpose. And he's brought in some brilliant new players like Finbar Rorty and Kieran Moore and fellas like that. They're the young guns, and of course bringing back Murphy has been a master stroke. So whether he is good, bad or indifferent, he was dead right to come back and see could he make a difference, and of course he hasn't made a big difference. I think the concern for me is that as the championship has gone on, he started off coming on as subs in the early games, and they've become more and more and more reliant on him as time has gone by, and that's not a good thing. But now Oisín Gallen inside is a great scorer, and the O'Donnells, they have great players, but without Murphy playing well, it's hard to see Donegal winning.
And the same on the other side with your man, do you think? Is it too easy to say that?
Yeah, I'm going to All-Irelands now. The first All-Ireland final I was at was in 1967 when Meath won. So I probably couldn't make a great judgment on players up until the 70s. But like, say, from the Kerry team on, I certainly have never seen as good as David Clifford.
Really?
To me, he's the best player I have ever seen. And he produces the goods for club and county, winter, summer, Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. Like, when would you say he's had a really bad game? I know 2 years ago in the final against Dublin, and Mick Fitzsimons was on him, and Mick Fitzsimons got a lot of credit, and he did well, and what a brilliant man Mick Fitzsimons was for Dublin. But like David Clifford could have had a goal and 6 or 7 points. He narrowly missed on several occasions. So I think he's a sort of an unstoppable force. And this year also, he seems to me to be in better form than ever before. He seems fitter, stronger, hungrier, more energetic. The new rules have liberated him.
The rules definitely have liberated him. Because you can't be fouling him anymore as well. Do you know what I mean? The game has changed. And the refereeing even has changed, I think, with the new rules as well. So that makes a huge difference. And I think what's undervalued as well, Colm, with him is his ability to play other players into positions as well. Like, he's a brilliant vision. His head is always up. So if his shot isn't on, and it nearly always is because he's such a remarkable double-footed player and can hit from such distance, but he also has the ability to bring other players. And I thought that when he got such criticism for that last final, I remember thinking, But, you know, he made scores for other people. But because he's so brilliant, everybody expects him to convert. And maybe today is the day we won't see him converting as much. But Paddy, who's back fitter, obviously, clearly. And then they have a load of other people who are coming into games like Joe O'Connor and that. It's going to be fascinating. I've never heard as many actual pundits, people who know the game well and are, you know, judging it every week, saying we think this could be a draw. I've never heard as many.
And there's a very split. You know, I didn't nearly know who to go for. I went for Kerry on the basis that Kerry win most finals to get to. Nothing much more than that. And they have the experience. They've been around for the last 3 or 4 years, whereas Donegal are quite new, even though they could have easily been in the final last year as well.
Yeah, I was in the University Hospital in Galway yesterday, and there was a conversation took up around one of the beds where there was an old lad in the bed, and he'd said to the nurse, what's going to happen now with this game tomorrow? You know, in the spirit that everybody everywhere is talking about it. And the nurse, being the very polite, caring person that she is, said, well, listen, it's very tight, hard to call it either way. We know that, said your man. Tell me who's going to win it. And that, I thought, was very much the essence of where the conversation is at around it. Just that piece about David Clifford that you mentioned, Colm, a couple of minutes ago, our own Sheehan was down around deepest, darkest Kerry, I was going to say, but maybe deepest, brightest Kerry at the minute. Some sensational pieces from down around there, but he got talking to Mick O'Connell. I think wouldn't speak to him, but one of his friends did, and I was just struck by the conversation where he said David Clifford, he was very careful with his language. Mick was the greatest midfielder of all time. David Clifford was the greatest forward of all time. But that, you know, a player at the age of 26, it's such an unusual conversation to be having, even at this stage of his career, about him just being the greatest footballer that we've ever seen.
Yes, and it's also unusual that playing, 7 or 8 years for Kerry now, he has only one All-Ireland medal. So most Kerry fellas to be talked about in sort of such lofty words would have 3, 4, 5, 6 All-Irelands. So he is different, and that maybe is a huge burning incentive for him as well. Like, I suppose you're lucky in Kerry. If you grow up and you're a good footballer in Kerry and you get on the county team, you can look forward over a decade. You're probably going to play in 5 or 6 All-Ireland finals. You're probably going to win 3 or 4, and you might even be just an ordinary player. That's just the value, a tradition, and the passion that they have for it. So Clifford is just a different class of player. Like, you know, you compare him to Murphy. David Clifford doesn't have bad games. Not that I can remember anyway. You know, all of us that played in All-Ireland finals, we had games and Leinster finals and things like that I look back on. Played in quite a few, played in 10 Leinster finals. But somebody said to me, how many did you play well in? I'd say maybe 3 or 4. You know, and whereas Clifford would say if he played in 10 finals, probably he could say I played well in 8 or 9.
Yeah, and even that one that you mentioned earlier, he had a lot going on in his personal life around that time. Maybe all that fed into him a little bit. But
it's funny. I don't know whether you feel the same way, but I think when you see players of their quality, you remember the first time you've seen them. And I remember with Clifford, I think it was at the 2017 minor final. He scored 4-4 or something in it.
He looked like a man amongst boys.
And he was so much bigger than them as well. And they were falling away from him.
Yeah,
and he still has that incredible physical strength as well, apart from being a brilliant footballer. Which means that was the first time I remember thinking, oh my God, this guy's going to be amazing. And the same, it's funny, Michael Murphy. I always remember seeing Michael Murphy when he was younger. And I distinctly remember they played Dublin in an under-21 final. It was up in Breffni. Do you remember? It was in Cavan. And he missed a penalty to win it. He hit the bar.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I always remember thinking afterwards to that could have destroyed many a player's career. And you know what I mean? But this guy, his personality is such, and I think Clifford is similar as well, is they're very self-contained kind of people, you know, and they can survive when they do have a bad game, and they just keep going and rolling with it. And he's very laid back, Murphy, and I think that's part of his talent. And Clifford as well. That's a big part of the temperament.
If you're a cornerback, you know, the traditional view was put a cornerback out and he'll batter the small corner forward, and then you come out to play on Clifford, and he's bigger, stronger, faster, fitter, more skillful than you. So what do you do?
And then Murphy, who is as I said, come back from 2 years. It's extraordinary how good he's playing, but he's a very different kind of player now.
Yes.
And where they put him
fitter
today, he looks incredibly fit. But also there's that thing of physical people. People used to always say that with Murphy, trying to mark him because he was such a big unit. You were struggling right from the start as well. But where they play Murphy today, I think it's going to be very interesting as well, and where he may move during the game as well.
On Clifford, Joe on the opposite side of the page to you in the Sunday Independent come today. Not only is he, a Joe Brawley article must always start off with the several texts he got from and how these people must remain unnamed.
It takes him a long time to make all of those up.
By his own admission, by all accounts. But he says here about Clifford, when opposition defenders collapse onto him, he sends a teammate in for an early score with his dazzling armoury of lobs, flicks, overhead kick passes and no-look hand passes. And when he sees an opportunity to score for a teammate, he'll make a dummy run, dragging defenders away to create space. Like, that's part of the essence of the David Clifford
He has
play
a great line. He says, the defensive system, this is talking about, works against everybody because Jimmy's systems operate on the fundamental basis that no one can defy the law of physics except David Clifford, which is a good line.
In your piece, Colm, so you talk about, how do you stop David Clifford, right? Brendan McCole, you talk about maybe the extra man in the Donegal defence, possibly in both defences. You talk about getting Gallen into space high up the pitch, the kick-outs, and on we go, right? So you've gone into the details of how this game could be won and lost. But then also, early in the piece, you mentioned Alex Ferguson, and this stuff doesn't really mean, it means a little bit, but it doesn't mean a lot, and it'll be down, players win matches, I think, was your line.
Yeah, well, I'd say that there wouldn't have been much tactical analysis by either manager coming up to the game because they got so used to playing together and everybody is used to the pattern of play. And it's basically then, maybe Donegal will say to Ryan McHugh or Padder Morgan or somebody, hang back, especially early on in the game, don't be too adventurous, because Kerry have the ability to foot pass better than most teams. So if they get the ball in defence, their first option is to look for a foot pass to somebody who will hang out on the right side of midfield or the left side out near the touchline, kick, and a kick in then to Clifford. And they have the option also of kicking it in high into him because he's so good in the air. So that is the big danger. And I'd say that's the thing that would have taken Jim McGuinness's. And now the other interest during the week, the other big thing is how Kerry going to cope with all these fellas coming running at 100 miles an hour.
And able to score.
Meath were just completely overrun in the second half. Like they swarmed like bees forward and they do so at pace. And I was just having a laugh last week in the paper saying with the flight of the Earls from Donegal where the O'Donnells went, it was just as well for Donegal football team that at least a few of them stayed behind because Conor O'Donnell and Shane O'Donnell have been brilliant this year. And they're, a lot of players, it's very hard to get a player to run directly at an opponent because most people take the safe route. They run across the pitch on the hand pass. Donegal go and attack the man. And they try and get by the first man. And if they get by the first man, then the whole thing opens up for them because obviously there are fewer defenders than there was last year. So Jim McGuinness, I think, has changed his tactics this year, not for this game, I say, just for the whole year by saying to fellas, take on your man and attack him. And the O'Donnells have been good at that. Moore, Rorty, Morgan, Ryan McHugh, they all take on their man.
All do it.
And once the first man is beaten, then the whole thing opens up for them.
Jim has that ability, the Alex Ferguson type sort of comparison where no matter what you say in hindsight, this was a bit of genius, and so he's been out saying David Clifford possibly the greatest of all time, and everybody's reading into it as this great sort of mind games. Yeah,
well, I think the piece you quoted of me saying about Alex Ferguson, I think somebody said to him that I think they were 3-0 down against Spurs one day, and Alex Ferguson went into the dressing room and more or less says, lads, what's going on? This is Spurs we're playing. It wasn't a compliment to Spurs. And then after the match, they had won 5-3, and somebody was saying about the tactical genius of Alex Ferguson, how he changed things or whatever. And basically, Ferguson's message was, I told him to go out and bloody well start playing. And he said, tactics don't win games.
And when you look
men do. And I think he also said that another time, great men win big games. And I think that will apply today as well.
And we saw it with the hurling final last week as well. Do you know what I mean? Like Liam Cahill obviously at half time told the lads, look, we're well in this. But it was the players who went out and produced incredible hurling as well. Do you know what I mean? And we come back to the old thing about All-Ireland finals, and Colin will probably remember these things as well as a player, but that notion that somebody's going to spring. You could have a springer here who's going to do it. Like Willie Connors had the game of his life last week for Tipperary. Who could that be today? I thought bringing people like Dara Wheel back, I thought was a really smart move. And I think he's the kind of player who could come off the bench. And we know McVirty's there. But who else could it be today? We just, it's an unknown, which is what makes it so fantastic. But I do think, like Colm said, the game has changed. And there are lovely pieces today, like Dermot Crowe's front page in the Indo is like a Renaissance season. And he says it's set for football to side off with the masterclass. And he talks about, and even Eamon Sweeney and a couple of other people, they say, like, it isn't just these two teams that have changed the season. There have been so many highlights, so many teams, Louth coming through. There have been lots of Meath having their moment in the sun. It's been, everything kind of opened up because of the new rules this year, of which Michael Murphy was part, of course, which is hilarious. Everybody laughs at that and says he made the rules for himself. But like, it has been a brilliant season, and it looks to be made up for a great final. But could we go again?
There'll be people listening to this podcast at around 5:30 or 6 this evening going, what are those Aegis talking about?
Exactly, for sure. I'll be completely wrong.
I'm used to that.
Shane McGrath has a lovely piece, though, I think, in the Mail on Sunday as well. It's a bit like Dermot's, but it's just very lyrical. It's just a beautiful piece about what the GA means to people. Do you know what I mean? That you're saying, like, in the hospital, the nurse is getting asked, and we'll talk about it later in relation to the Lions and Australian rugby and its place down there. But like, that's exactly what you're saying. Football has been renewed, but it will change again, and we will change again. And he said the urge to keep pushing on was well put by the late Kerryman and Brendan Kennelly, the poet, and he said, who wrote in the lovely poem Begin, of something that will not acknowledge conclusion, insisting that we forever begin. And he was saying, like, it's all changed this year, but in 2 years' time it could have changed again. And that's the fascination. But it's our game. It's our people who changed it. Do you know what I mean? It was a collaborative thing to change the rules. Some people would say it didn't happen quick enough, but it happened, and football has been renewed. And he said, for today, it's Kerry and Donegal, but it isn't a private tussle. He says this is for all of us, because the All Ireland Day is ours. It's us.
It mirrors basically what Eamon Sweeney was also saying about all the different counties which you mentioned, Louth and Meath and Monaghan, and all the different counties have contributed so much to the season. But I think we owe great debt to Jim Gavin and his group of people who have done the state some service with the change of rules. I remember speaking to Jim Gavin when he was bringing this in, and we were having dinner one evening, and I was saying to Jim, these ideas you have, they're absolutely stupid. The idea that you were going to get three fellas to stay up the field. And Jim was taking out napkins, and he was drawing, this could happen here and this could happen. And the girl that was serving the dinner came over, and Jim had a hole in front of him full of napkins with drawings on them. And she was looking at him going, what's going on here, with this fella? But he had gone into such depth and deep thinker of the game. That was the one thing I think that has proven to be, apart from the long kick out, which is fantastic, but keeping three up, I said, that won't happen. I said, did you imagine a referee in an old club match arriving to a referee game, no umpire, no linesman, and he's supposed to referee the game and keep his eyes in the back of his head to see is there three up. In fact, it's working better at club level nearly than anywhere.
Is it?
Oh, it is, yeah. Like, I've been at a lot of club matches. Yeah. Forwards are delighted because they don't have to chase back.
Yeah.
It's working very, very well.
They're compliant.
Absolutely, and it's made it easier to referee because there's less of these sort of rucks that take place with people bringing the ball into contact. So there's less frees, more free flowing, more scores, more action, and the best players are getting a chance to shine. So Jim Gavin, thanks very much.
I'm going to ask you the impossible question, but like, in terms of that, the Renaissance piece and it being the first year and there having been a couple of tweaks and maybe there are more tweaks to come, where do you think we're at in the overall trajectory? Will the game get even better again? Are we seeing the high point currently, or what's your expectation?
Well, I always thought that what you need is, like in basketball or rugby, an ongoing rules review committee who could make changes year on year on year. To me, the one thing I would like to see brought in is once you go by midfield, it's like the basketball, you can't play the ball back. And that would force players to probably kick the ball more. We still have far too much hand passing, and the only way we're going to get rid of that is maybe put a limit on it, or maybe bring in a series of other changes. And I think Jim Gavin was very keen, thought that this would bring in more kicking, hasn't brought in as much as he would like. The ratio is still 3 or 4 to
To
1.
hand passing, yeah.
So, like, if you must play the ball forward, like if a fella gets into trouble, it also would encourage the backs that they could push out more, knowing that the players can't go back.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I would like to see that trial at least. And I'd also like, get rid of that small arc. I don't see it has no relevance today, and confusing at times for players shooting. Like,
Yeah.
it's to
Just
keep
get rid of
players-
the line.
Get rid of the line because like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
there to stop encroaching on a penalty taker. So, like, just say to everybody, well, you have to stay outside the big arc.
Yeah, and just have the big one, yeah.
Yeah,
And
so-
maybe, like, eventually, it's hard to know how do you get rid of the too many hand passes, because when teams are looking to retain possession, it is still what they use primarily. So unless you put a shot clock on it, like basketball, and say
Shot clock would be great. I
shot
don't
clock,
know if it's doable.
but there's your back to you. How would you if and Colm is right, people did say, oh, this will never work at club level, and the shot clock will never work at club level. So that's the problem. So I think we're probably going to have to live with the surface of hand passes for the moment.
The clock has worked very well. Again, I thought, why do you need a clock? Should the ref puts up 3 minutes to go of extra time? Fine, let's get on with it. But the clock has actually added
That
to the
clock
sense
has really worked. Absolutely.
sense of
The hooter
occasion.
is
Yeah, the hooter.
so
yeah,
dramatic.
Yeah.
And then you have also the players playing down to get a chance when the hooter is gone,
Yeah.
so that they try and place their best shooter in position to shoot when the hooter is gone, knowing that it's half time or the game is over.
Yeah, so it's all adding to the excitement of the
Yes.
game. And to be honest, some of these things, the shot clock, the end of match clock has come from women's football. And as somebody who watches women's football as well, I would say, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, women's football now needs a review, because women's Gaelic football, because what happened was you had a load of people who managed the men's game coming into the women's game, making the women play defensively like the men, but they don't have the power with the kicking to go long lengths. So it's become a very defensive, negative hand passing game. And I would love to see a review of women's Gaelic football now, because it's crying out for it, because we've seen what it's done to the men's game.
and the great thing about the new rules is the players themselves love them.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. And I agree, Meath are in the All-Ireland final next Sunday, which is going to be a big occasion against Dublin as well. It'll be very exciting. I'll be there for that as well. But I think the women's game needs to get a bit rougher as well. I think
and the players are dying for it.
Yes,
They want rule changes.
Yes,
Yeah.
let them get stuck in more. I think it'd make for a better game.
Yeah, you do hear a lot of players and former players, and Nadine Doherty has written about it in Sunday Independent as well, that idea of making it a bit more physical. Just to linger on the game a little bit more, and particularly the Jim McGuinness factor, because he's written quite a bit about it across a lot of the pages. Dermot Crowe focuses in on the Kerry years, and like I was struck, you were mentioning Colm earlier. Colm was mentioning earlier about the kick passing and how it's, I was going to say uniquely Kerry thing, and that's absolutely untrue, but certainly they've perfected the art in that neck of the woods. But the shaping in that Dermot Crowe piece of his philosophy, the observing of the Kerry way, the stuff about self-belief really hums through in it. And it reminded me, Mark McHugh was at our football pod show at Croke Park on Thursday night, and like his talk about playing under Jim McGuinness and how he would just, like Mark McHugh was saying, come Sunday, I'm going to be going to Croke Park, absolutely believing that Donegal would win, having come through that sort of Jim McGuinness school. That is he's obviously gone off to craft his career in a load of different other areas based around that same sort of maybe self-belief as much as anything else, but that talent he seems to have for creating buy-in within a squad, if he could bottle it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I suppose the downside of that is, why did it not work the last time they played against Kerry? There are no certainties.
No.
Like everybody can say, oh yeah, we went in the firm belief that we were going to win. I'm sure Cork hurlers thought that too. So I admire these people who have these great certainties in life, because I'm not one of them. When I was going to an All-Ireland final, the fear of losing for me was the greatest motivational factor.
Really?
It wasn't the great certainty that we're going to win. But what Jim McGuinness, I think, and most of the modern managers now try to do is they instill a process. They say, forget about the end of the game, forget about the score, forget about everything. We're playing the way we are, and we want to play like that each minute, and disregard all the other sort of things that are going on.
Maybe it's the belief that you can win, rather, because Mark McHugh mentioned the time, obviously, that Jim came in. The first time, went around the room at the start and said, for the entire squad, who do you think is going to win? And I think two hands went up. one of them was definitely Michael Murphy, and I can't remember who the other one was.
Dermot Malloy, I think.
Was it? Okay.
Malloy, yeah,
and then by the time he had
Break.
given his
Yes.
hour-long talk or whatever, who thinks we're going to win the All-Ireland now? And every hand went up. Now listen, there's an aspect of this in the team environment.
But it's interesting. Like that's what like Jack O'Connor has to have that same charisma, because he would not be back taking a team back.
Yeah.
And as you say, another great thing about O'Connor is, and we don't know as much about him, even though he's written a book and as well, is like I think he's much more enigmatic. But he has to have that same charisma because he's done it with so many, like Boylan, with so many different groups of people. Okay. Everyone will argue, everyone in, all the footballers in Kerry have an innate talent, and that piece that Dermot Crowe does, it's about McGuinness Down when he was in Tralee IT, and he got obsessed with the fact that everybody was such a brilliant footballer, that they could kick off both feet, that they had a particular, even beautiful style of following through in the way they kicked the ball. But O'Connor has to have that same charisma, I think, and we don't know as much about it as you say, but there's so much more about Donegal even ahead of this final. But surely he has it as well, and whether it's a system or not, he does have players that are innately brilliant footballers to work with as well. But he has to have that conviction, because how could he be back here again? And they're interesting
Minor,
too.
under 21
and
senior,
he's the one who's done it with all three age groups as well, which is incredible.
The Michael Foley piece in the Sunday Times talks about the other side, the career that he's gone off when, All-Ireland winning manager, Celtic coach, soccer gigs in China, Charlotte obviously, giving talks to the European Ryder Cup team, giving talks to Saracens rugby team, helps out with Galway, down, linked with Mayo obviously at a certain point like that.
Came back to help the club in Louth,
exactly, yeah. That exceptional career or life, dotted with a lot of tragedy column as well along the path. The passing of his brothers, but he is one of Irish sport's most fascinating characters.
He is, and you have to first of all admire his bravery to take on a lot of these projects. Like a fella from Donegal, like the traditional loyalty there is with Glasgow Celtic, where he went first of all and learned a bit about the coaching, but head off to China, head to America. Like these were sort of alien places. He had no backup. He didn't have his own men with him, the people that he would rely on in Donegal, the close people like Colm McFadden that he has in Neil McGee. Like he had to go solo. It's a certain bravery and single-mindedness and determination to make a career. So that is something that I would admire greatly in him, because he could have taken the easy route in life, stayed in Donegal. He was going to be a hero forever, maybe do something else involved in soccer, or go back managing Donegal at some time. But like he took the road less travelled.
Well, China and America in particular, like took culturally so different in every way possible, and also, going into professional sport where everything is about money, where everything's about budgets, where everything's about a lot of things that you as a coach or manager can't control really. He is very brave. You have to give him
and
that.
I'd say those experiences have hardened him, because they didn't work out very well. Let's be clear
Michael
about
Foley's
that.
piece is quite good on that it didn't work out exactly.
But he says he might go back to it.
He has rolled it out.
But everything he touches hasn't turned to gold for him. So he's had many setbacks. You mentioned the tragedy of his brothers, setbacks with the soccer career. He knows the hard road as well as everybody else. So, fair play to him for trying it.
Nobody begrudge him.
There's a nice just on that, Adrian, just as it links in, there's a nice piece in the Sunday Indo done by Aidan Fitzmaurice, one of their best soccer writers. But it's just about Finn Harps' place and Finn Harps and how Finn Harps are coexisting with GAA. And it's interesting because obviously McGuinness has had the soccer interest as well. It's just a really good article. It's well worth reading because they're a fan-based club. They don't have a load of money. The League of Ireland now is getting in lots of, even foreign owners that are bringing money. But this is a really interesting piece about how he believes and says that Finn Harp, they have a lot of work to do themselves. They need to do infrastructure stuff and everything. But how the grounds, even in Ballybuffet and Stranorlar, like they're so close. Like I have a first cousin in Stranorlar. My mother was from Donegal, and I always had a place to park in Stranorlar. Pat Brennan and his wife, we used to always park at their place to do matches. But like Finn Harps is just across the road. They'll all be Finn Harps fans as well as mad Gaelic fans. So it's a really interesting piece, I think. And his point is that they managed to coexist. McGuinness's son actually spent time in the Mark Anthony spent time in Finn Harps academy, but he's saying they kind of have to make a decision around 16, 17, but locally they're not seen as different entities, and there isn't an enmity between them. You know, there isn't that split that would be in some places where you couldn't play one or do the you had to do one or the other when you were a kid. And it's a really interesting piece. And there's Corey Sheridan is this new young keeper that Finn Harps are trying out. He's only 17. He's a really good soccer player, but also he's a really good hurler. His dad was a Cavan hurler, and his favourite sport is hurling.
Not much room for him in the Donegal goals with Sean Patton, who was a former soccer player
as well. Exactly.
And there is that huge
There's a great
link.
crossover.
Of course Finn Harps and Celtic, Packy Bonner, back to those sorts of days. But Donegal are unusual, and that piece that you have mentioned there is very interesting about the development of young people, and you would know this as well as anybody else. Like, you know, this idea that trying to force people to choose a game that they're going to be proficient at early on. Whereas, you know, I think you would share my views, Clíona, that I would encourage young boys and girls to play as many sports as they possibly can up until the age of 16, 17. And then if you're going to be an elite type of performer, you must choose. But like from a Gaelic football point of view, play soccer, play rugby, play basketball, I think is a huge thing for them. And keep playing those sports. The problem is now that the demands on people for, say if you're a Gaelic footballer and you're 13, 14, 15, there's all these different types of academies and you're being in there 2 nights a week and you're doing diet and you're doing this. To me, it's over the top sort of stuff. And whereas people should be encouraged, play as much as you can and then 16 or 17, concentrate on what you like best and probably what you're best at.
Yeah,
and the sports themselves don't want you doing that.
No,
that's a big.
And the clubs don't want you doing
it
as well. Clubs definitely don't want you doing. There is that thing there where we've got them. We're not letting anybody else have them. Yeah. But it's an interesting one, I think, because that Donegal. It's always interested me how they. But it's a really nice piece.
Great angle on the day.
Yeah, great angle on the day, but also very telling about, you know, what it's like to try and keep a League of Ireland, you know, a fan-based League of Ireland club going, and how many people have been doing it for years and what they need to do next. It's very good, yeah. They started work on a new stadium back in 2009 and they still haven't got it going, you know. So that's the battle that people are at, and most of them volunteers as well, as we always say.
A good time for you to reveal your Donegal roots there, Clíona. Slip that in sort of very quietly.
Well, I go on holidays to Donegal occasionally. Is that enough of a link?
Your roots are not a million miles away.
I have no Kerry roots. I can only say that.
Spread far and wide.
A couple of more pieces that we want to touch on before we leave the GA, the Gaelic football. Jason Foley, Kerry fullback. Colm, I know this was one that resonated with you. He's covered interview with him in a few pieces today.
Well, it looks like when you look at that, the only 2 players that were made available for press interviews seems to be Peadar Mogan, and who's a PE teacher, and Jason Foley, who is a special needs assistant. And it's not the sort of role that you expect with a sort of tough full-back from Kerry, is to be going into school on a Monday morning. Made reference to it after the Meath game, when they got a bit of a mauling for Meath, and they have a lot to be thankful to Meath for, because I think it sharpened them considerably. And of course the knives were out in Kerry. Some former players weren't very kind to them after that game, and it seems to me they have sort of built an anger within them to an extent that has brought them through the big games against Armagh and Tyrone. And of course Kerry were always supposed to have a problem with Ulster teams, so that didn't manifest itself in those 2 games. But you know, from my professional background as a principal in school, I would have to say the special needs assistants in school are the most brilliant people, caring, understanding, empathetic, and it's lovely to see a fellow like Jason Foley getting prominence for a role that he plays outside of his sport.
Well, even, you know, an inter-county full-back saying, I was advised to go into it about the special needs assistant path. I was advised to go into it. I was told that I was compassionate towards children with special needs on placements and stuff like that, and really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed helping children develop, I suppose, and very, very lucky to be involved in it. And he talks as well about, like, you know, later on in the piece, when you're surrounded by adults the whole time, you know, the profile or the spotlight that comes up in the position he's in, surrounded by adults the whole time, or staff members or different kids, it can be, he says, you know what I mean, they're all questions about the game. Sometimes it could be a breath of fresh air when you're surrounded by children who are oblivious to all that. I can imagine the bubble that provides is
and the perspective it provides is that's what's lovely in the piece, is what comes across is he's saying, like, like when I go into school, on a Monday after losing a match or whatever, there's been something's gone bad in football, everything changes, And he has a fantastic line. He says, you don't know what you're going to come in and into when you're going into school with people with special needs, and you just have to roll with the punches and make their life as great as possible for that day. Isn't that an amazing thing to say?
It's the thing that I love about the Sunday papers is, those angles on games that, listen, we're all interested in this one, but there's often a game where you're like, geez, I can't muster any enthusiasm for that today.
It just shows you too, like that, in a lot of ways, the GA players are very well-rounded, balanced fellas. It's just a bloody pity that we don't know more about them. Yeah. These press nights, and, the traditional Kerry press night is, there's a stock answer. There's about 6
and it normally starts with Yarra.
Yeah. Well, famously, there was the fellow who, the Kerry player famously said, put me down for what I said last year. The other player that was put up as well, and Colm is right, they were obviously the two players, but Padder Mogan, there's some really nice pieces with him. Mark Gallagher has a particularly nice piece in the Mail on Sunday, and he's also profiled in the Sunday Indo, and Mark is from Donegal, of course, so he knows it, but it's that Mount Charles have 3. It's just talking again this lovely thing about club and place and community, and they have 3 players on the team and what it means to them, because actually, and it's amazing. It was actually the place that years and years ago, the very first meeting took place to start a Donegal County Board. It didn't happen. It happened, 30 years later, but actually it was in Mount Charles. But it's a really good piece on Padder Mogan, and I feel really old because he remembers 2012. He knows where he was watching 2012 in the stand. He was 13. He was in first year in school. Yes. Do you know what I mean?
Nothing
that just
like that
gives it.
Well,
oh my God.
But they're the real impressionable years too, because if you're a young fella there at a game, and I can recall being, say, at that All-Ireland 67 and saying the cup coming around and saying, Jesus, wouldn't it be great to play in Croke Park once? Maybe play some game in Croke Park or play on a team that could win something. Wouldn't that be the greatest thing in life?
How many times did you play in the end?
For Meath or in Croke Park?
In Croke Park.
Oh, I'd say 60, 70 times. Maybe because,
this was in the knockout days.
Yeah, we played a lot of games when I was in UCD there. Played league matches there. We played league matches for Meath against Dublin. Then we nearly played all our championship matches there. So probably something like that. And never ceased to sort of amaze me, the whole surroundings. I got a thrill out of it every time I was there. Yeah, we were lucky enough, I suppose, won a good bit, but lost a lot of games. And I think in sort of tandem with a lot of players, when they're interviewed, and managers especially, they often talk about the games they lost. And like a lot of the games and the big games that I was involved with me that we lost are much more clearly etched on my brain than the big games that we won. And you say, geez, this such and such a fella did something. Or particularly you hone in on your own individual performance. And I missed a point there at a crucial time. I remember Mick Kennedy blocking a ball in the Leinster final and Dublin going up and getting a point and winning the game. And it took me about 3 years to get over that. And then you have like the All-Ireland final against Down was a tough one when we had played the 4 games against Dublin. You remember all these things and you always say, I missed a point in the All-Ireland final against Cork. I should have got it, and then we were beaten very closely. And you say, but you never forget, or you sort of put away to the side.
Isn't that amazing? Like, even for somebody from like Colm, like who's played so much and won so much, and it's common to every single elite athlete in the world in every sport. You ask them, they always remember the one that they did wrong, the one they didn't put off the right kick, or were too slow in that race. And it's always it's a human condition. You remember, isn't that bizarre? It's awful, really, in some ways.
I played in 5 championship finals not in a row with Screen with my club. The first 5 county finals that I played with Screen, we lost them all. Oh. And I played badly in nearly every one of them. And I was thinking to myself, if you got to give yourself a bit of a lash and play well, we probably would win one. And now, thankfully, we did one before I finished, and we got 2 then before I finished. But that was a huge thing. And a lot of those finals again would be sort of left a deep and lasting.
Even now, like
the
inter-county with Meath, 2 wins, 2 losses. I know there was 5 games in total, obviously, but on that regard,
Yeah,
your mind goes to the losses.
Oh yeah, and big games against Dublin. We lost 5 Leinster finals out of the 10 that I played in to Dublin, and you'd say, God, there was some of those we should have won. There was one of them. Well, I could talk about them all.
Amazing.
Go on, give us
you need to get him back.
we were going for we whatever we won, and we're playing them in the '89 final, and they got a goal near the end, a deflected goal, and beaten us. We had won the All-Ireland the previous 2 years,
87,
and we thought we'd win another one, and anyway, it went down to the wire, and Dublin won it. So again, you think of things, but we came back and beat them in 1991. To me, the biggest games nearly of all were the Dublin Leinster finals.
They were always amazing. And 91 was phenomenal.
And we kicked the tar out of each other. And when the game was over, I always admired the Dubs in that way. When the game was over, the game was over. And there was no crying or cribbing or anything. They just got on with it.
Yeah. Well, we'll come to the Lions maybe in a minute. We can draw that thread. So just before we leave the last piece that I wanted to mention was Mark Gallagher in the Mail on Sunday. All-Ireland Sunday deserves a Super Bowl treatment. He talks about the feverish anticipation, the frenzy over tickets, the absurd pre-match rumours. He says in the hours before last week's throw in, the story was that there was sickness in the Tipperary camp had drifted through the taverns of Drumcondra. I haven't been out of the country, I didn't hear that one, but he says the thing is that the television coverage doesn't really capture any of that. The broadcast of All-Ireland Final Day should be fit a day and event of such national importance. As a rule, we probably should stop looking towards the States for inspiration in anything, but they do know how to do television correctly. We're missing a beat on the you're both well placed to answer this one. Missing a beat on the TV coverage.
I don't know. I don't like the Americanization of the overhype of sports events, and I even watching the lines and even going to internationals. That music, whenever there's a break in play and you have to put music on now in rugby, just drives me absolutely mad. I'm just a traditionalist in this respect. I don't think we do it any better or any worse really than anybody else. It's a difficult thing to capture all that on TV. I saw people whinging about the Sunday game or the RT show last night. It's a very hard thing to do, the up for match thing, because you're trying to cover all the generations. You're trying to get all the angles. You're trying to do everything, and there's a lot of coverage during the week building up. We had massive coverage this week building up to it as well. I think trying to fit all that into a TV show is just not easy. But I don't think I'd be going the Americanization. I know people are saying, you want, look, in athletics they do stuff like if you're abroad at World Championships, European Championships, they do have lovely things like, they'd have big spaces for the kids to try running and sprinting and throwing and all that good stuff outside the grounds, and there'd be a lot of razzmatazz around that. And maybe there's a bit of that missing, but again, you're confined by the space of Croke Park to do that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I don't know how much more hype. I'm a traditionalist. I just want to watch the action. Maybe that's just me.
The BBC seem to have got a lot of praise, Colm, for their. They bring this kind of, who do they have? Paul Mescal and all these other people at the hurling last weekend.
Oisin McConville and Philly McMahon and Mickey Hart.
Is good too. I like him as a commentator.
And they do it well. RTE do it well. There's no Joe Bradley to throw in a grenade anywhere and set off. I think the main thing with punditry in general is that people afterwards are talking about it and saying, well, they agree or they disagree, that at least people have strong opinions on things and whether they're right or wrong. And maybe that's lacking a bit because there is a bit of blandness in punditry in general, I think, because people are afraid of upsetting others, and there is a certain amount of political correctness which you shouldn't have in sport because it's supposed to be raw and it's supposed to upset people, and people are supposed to have strong opinions on things, and people who are on television should stoke that fire within others.
Would you have been conscious of that? You had somebody to your right, I think from recollection, that would generally be the prime candidate for that stuff, but would you have been conscious of that in your time, that this is a game of opinions and I need to get behind mine?
Yeah, absolutely. Pat and Joe would be strong-minded and different things, but I think that added to the gaiety of the nation.
They were always entertaining.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
And I always thought, the idea, David Clifford gets the ball and what a brilliant point he's after kicking. Everybody can see that. Is there something different or something else? And just because Joe said mad things didn't mean sometimes that they were quite right, and often proven to be in the long run. And he had a particular view. You need particular views on it to stir up people's emotions and get people thinking, because if we were all thinking the same, it would be a pretty boring world. Now, if we all disagreed on things, it would be worse. But there is a balance.
There's a balance somewhere. I think that's the key bit. You're listening to the Sunday Paper Review and Off the Ball, brought to you by Dove Plus Men Care, proud partners of the British and Irish Lions. You can upgrade to Dove Men Plus Care because care changes everything. We are going to move on to the rugby now. About 20 minutes thereabouts to get through the rest of the story. So there is some coverage clearly of the game yesterday. We mentioned sort of some of the papers. The Times have gone for it as the lead. It's further deep into the Sunday Independent. But it was such a shame, outside of the coverage, that yesterday wasn't the first test. Like when you contrasted the calmness in the aftermath of the first test, the players going around shaking hands. Yes, we'd won, but there was no great celebration. And then the ecstasy yesterday. Now, they'd won the series, and so that was the context. The game was much tighter. They won it with the last play of the game. That was the context. But it was such a shame that Australia were so undercooked almost going into that first test.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to a lot of people, the Lions tour would leave them a bit cold. I have watched most of the games, even the midweek games. And I suppose I'm also conscious, having been in Australia quite a bit, that the lack of impact rugby union makes on the national psyche, probably comes in behind the Aussie rules. Cricket, soccer is making big impact there now. Rugby league in New South Wales in particular. So, and an awful lot of people will question, what is the Lions about, apart from being a giant juggernaut of money-making exercise and digging the Australian Rugby Union out of a hole. I was conscious too of Matt Williams in the Times yesterday writing about the lack of impact that the Lions have made in sort of a positive light. And the other side of it too is, Ireland would beat Australia. Wales would probably beat Australia, and they're not going very well. England would beat Australia. So in terms of a sporting contest, it looked unbalanced. But the great thing about it yesterday was that it was a fantastic game. And the other thing about it is, I suppose from an Andy Farrell point of view, he escaped the wrath of the foreign media by including so many Irish players that he was proved right in doing so. And that Hugo Keenan came up with the try at the end of the game. But in terms of a sporting spectacle, I don't know, even though I really enjoyed the game yesterday.
I thought yesterday's game was a brilliant game, but all the other ones, and I watched lots of the midweek games as well. And the reality is that once Skelton and Valentini went off yesterday, they collapsed. They didn't have the depth there. But I like, Roy Keane has a good piece in the Mail on Sunday. It's No Show Like a Joe Show. And he said yesterday was a great line. He says there was peak Schmidt ball, and the Aussies came out to fight, and they had the players that they could do it in the first half. But if you look at the result, they only what did they score in the second half? They only scored 3 points. So that shows it was a collapse, and nearly equivalent to the Cork footballers or the Cork hurlers in the way just suddenly they just couldn't cope at all in the second half. But he does make a fair point, and it's an interesting point. Nobody wanted the Australian job, and then some questions have been how did Schmidt take it on? Because they were so bad the last World Cup. They lost to Wales for whatever it was, 46 I think it was. 46. They scored 6 points. It was an all-time low for Australian rugby. And he says, look, at whatever happens, and you can argue the merits of the Lions tour, and it's basically fat track bullying, isn't it? Basically bringing in, against Australia, basically when you have the power of a couple of countries against them. But what Schmidt did, even to get that performance out of them yesterday, he says, actually deserves great credit, because he didn't want to go back coaching. He had expressed an interest in not going coach. It does raise the other question as well, is why and when and would he ever get the All Blacks job? Because he wasn't interested in going back coaching when he left here. He was like, go back to family, things, I'm just out of the game really. And then he went back to a really difficult one. And I'd be really interested to see where he'll go from here. But he says he really does. They couldn't have been at an all-time low. So to get that performance out of them, even for that one game yesterday, and give them a shot was pretty impressive.
For the sake of the tour, it would have been better if Australia had to win.
That's such a weird thing to be saying.
Of
it would have been a great build-up to next week. But I suppose the Irish fellas played their part in a big, big way.
And Keenan to do it.
Isn't that kind of the thing about the Lions, that I always sort of would disassociate maybe the midweek games from the tests,
Yeah.
because they probably are the marketing fluff, and like typically they do engage an awful lot more in the community. That seems to have been a really weird, and I don't quite know why it's been the case that they haven't
click, with it.
That midweek stuff and then the tests always feel like a bit more. But like ultimately, you've got your green hat on, and you're a bit more delighted that Hugo Keenan got the try at the end rather than Scott Cummings or whatever.
Well, what's when I look back on the Lions, to me, the grainy black and white from the New Zealand tours, maybe in the 1970s when you had Willie John McBride and Mike Gibson, and of course you had Garrett Edwards and Barry John and those legendary sort of figures of the game. That's when the tour seemed to be at their height, and of course they went off for 6 months early on, and it must have been a fantastic experience to go away for that length of time and spread the gospel. I suppose because there's such interconnection between
We're seeing
teams.
so much now. I was thinking, isn't it?
Like you have an autumn series, you have the All Blacks here. Like in the years before that, they were never here.
And we weren't seeing them playing for club sides in Europe. Where, everything has changed now. That's why I think like all of that magical gold dust that was around it is gone now, because we know the players from the Southern Hemisphere. We're seeing them in club championships. We're seeing them in all kinds of games. We're seeing them, as you say, in autumn friendlies and things. There's a couple of pieces today, though. I did think there's a nice piece by Owen Slott in the Sunday Times, I think, is well worth a read, just because he kind of he shows you what you didn't see on television, really, which I think is really nice. And he's a great image of Pollock, like with the baseball cap on backwards, acting the complete Aegis. And he says a kid with no regard for the seniors, whose exuberance was so unchanged that he wouldn't leave Johnny Sexton alone, squeezing his face and overhugging him to an extent that Sexton just did not know what to do. And another one was, and we saw a little bit of it, Owen Farrell bringing his little kid around the pitch with him afterwards, and he was saying something you never actually has ever seen Owen Farrell do before. So he said it was a lovely time for the players afterwards. And there is a lovely piece then, Peter O'Reilly in the Sunday Times has a nice piece just saying Keenan, of all people to do it, Keenan, who was like lost a stone, 6K, so ill on this test, played badly, and everyone was like, oh, what's wrong with him? And then it emerges. But also, he just seems to me to be the most humble, nice, calm, ordinary fella who never looks for the limelight. And his physical resilience is one of the unheralded things in the Irish team. Like, I know I've heard people saying he's the fittest guy in Ireland in the Irish rugby, but he always seems to be able to survive injuries, horrendous tackles. As a full back now, you really get hit. And this year is the first year that he really seemed to have struggled with injuries. And then he goes out, gets fit, gets back, gets sick, and then he comes in and he scores a try. Like, it really was fairy tale stuff for him. Yeah,
and his step was very impressive as well. Obviously the big controversy towards the end, we touched on it a bit earlier on, was the tackle within the laws of the book or not. Rory O'Connor in the Sunday Independent, he says so Joe Schmidt comes out to the media, and funny, Rory's talking about a stadium that caters for 100,000 people, and all the press facilities are really squeezed, which I think most people couldn't give two hoots about, but I found it interesting that left everybody in very close proximity to each other, which is the key point here. Schmidt quoted the law book and railed against referee Andrea Piardi's decision to disallow Hugo Keenan's try, not to disallow Hugo Keenan's try for Jack Morgan's clear out and Carlo Tizzano. The sounds of Sweet Caroline, You Raise Me Up, Angels, Dirty Old Town, and ABBA's Gimme 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 rang around the room. It's like the most awful thing I can only imagine for a manager or a coach.
Hearing all this next door, and actually Owen Slott mentions that as well. They were listening to all this stuff coming in from next door.
No, the Australian fairly dramatically collapsed out of that particular ruck. Now I suppose everybody can argue, and Joe Schmidt seemed to be very strong, that it should have been called as a foul, but there's an awful lot of those grey areas. I admire those fellas who in rugby go in and try and put their hands on the ball, knowing that there's somebody coming at 100 miles an hour to take them out of it. They must be the bravest men, the fellas on the jackal.
And that low tackling as well. Like, it's very hard to referee, Colm, isn't it? And there's a big piece, if anybody wants to look at that in detail and all the comments on it, and from the Australians, we were robbed was the Australian line, obviously. Chris Foy in the Mail on Sunday has a big piece on quoting everybody afterwards. And there's another one, the papers actually, is it the Mail on Sunday, actually asked a referee and he said it was legal as well. So there's quite a bit of post-match analysis of the tackle and everything.
Hopefully the All-Ireland
his line
final won't be
Tisana
like
was
that.
sprawling theatrically was his line as well. Yeah, hopefully you don't. Yeah, poor referees, you don't want to get stuck in. But it is a really hard, I think that very low tackle is very hard to police. You see it on the line all the time, on the touchline. Like, how, yesterday he looked as if he had one hand was around him and one wasn't. And yet, as I said, in the Mail on Sunday, there's an ex-referee, an international referee, and he says no, it was legal. So
well, ultimately, a lot, and VAR is the exact same thing. Like that ultimately, people assume that there's no interpretation allowed, and ultimately, most often than not, that's exactly what it comes back to.
Yeah.
Plenty of writing as there will be across the day. Anybody who's been listening for the last hour or so, and definitely in our WhatsApp group earlier, I got a real sense that of Colm O'Rourke, the sports fan, which I hadn't fully appreciated before, but there was stuff dropping into the WhatsApp group like David Walsh on the Tour de France and Peter O'Reilly on tennis in Ireland. So maybe we go with your Tour de France piece first, David Walsh.
Well, David Walsh is always worth reading anyway in the Sunday Times, and I suppose what he is making the comment here today about I'm not sure of the correct pronunciation of Pogacar.
That's him.
Pogacar is right.
And Vingegaard, who are the two sort of dominant personalities of the Tour. And anybody who has been watching the Tour, Pogacar has more or less dominated the Tour. And David Walsh is making the point that Vingegaard, who's from Denmark, has more or less given in to him, that Pogacar has bent the whole peloton to his will. And I suppose it reminded me a bit of the golf last Sunday with Scotty Scheffler.
Yeah.
He more or less did the same. And it was interesting even seeing the interviews with a lot of the players on Saturday. They nearly all thought, or maybe even Friday, this thing is over.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of playing out the next 2 days to see who's going to finish second. And David Walsh is more or less saying the same. Pogacar, when he made his move in the mountains, that was it. Everybody knew this is over.
After 12 stages of the 21.
The 12 stage,
he had got his lead, and that was it. And that he is going to go on to dominate. That he's making the point that he may be the best ever. And when you look back on sort of Eddie Merckx and Bernardino and some Jack Anquetil and all the great winners of the Tour de France, it's a fair comment from David Walsh, who knows his cycling.
He's followed it for years.
That this guy may be the best of all.
This will be his fourth win. He's still only 26, I think.
And what he's saying as well is for Visma, for the team, for Vingegaard's team, the problem is now how, if he mentally doesn't think he can beat him, who is going to come along? Who are they going to produce that actually they can convince will take him on? Because like everybody can see, his dominance is ridiculous, and some would say unbelievable, but there it is. That you see it every day. You've seen it every day. The last, it's been an amazing tour in terms of to have Ben Healy there, and if he hadn't had the crash, to have had Dunbar in there as well. It has been fabulous to watch. And the Tour de France is started yesterday, and it's brilliant that we have 3 Irish women. We've never had an Irish woman in before, and now we have 3, which is incredible.
Lots of coverage of that coming up, thanks to our Darren Naughton over the couple of weeks as well. The unbelievable word in relation to cycling can be interpreted whatever way you want. Time will tell. Some of those names you just trotted off there, in terms of your sport fanaticism, you watching cycling all through the years. What's your...
Well, I suppose when you grew up, or you were around in the 80s when you had Stephen Roach and Sean Kelly on the go, it was easy to get sort of immersed in cycling. It was a bit like that with boxing in my time as well. If you grew up in the era of Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier and George Foreman, everybody became a boxing expert. And, that's the way, I suppose, in your youth, you tend to watch the big things at the time. And
but a lot of people watch that, Kelly and Roach, and maybe, all the controversy that happened thereafter was kind of interesting for people. But then they kind of dropped off, but you kept with it a little bit by the sounds of things. Yeah,
and I suppose Ben Healy maybe will give us an injection of great interest for the future. But like when boxing, I remember being at school at the time of sort of Foreman, and you had to wake up the next morning, find out who
get the result.
Who won the big fight.
Yeah, nowadays they won't wait 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, it's funny enough, I'll tell you a funny story about you can't wait 2 minutes. I was sitting beside a Dublin Crow Park at the Dublin Armagh game, and he said to me, Conor Callan is not starting. And I said, how do you know that? He was from Coola, and he says, my son is friendly with a group of fellas and they know Conor Callahan. He knows Conor Callahan well. He says, he's not playing, he's not starting. I said, where is he? Because is he around us? He says, no, he's in Colombia. And I says, what do you mean he's in Colombia? He's after texting back from Colombia. He's on some of these trails that they are in Colombia to tell me before the match, Conor Callahan is not playing. Some of his mates. So this is... Yeah, this is
the
worldwide.
friend was in Colombia, reporting back the news.
If it was 30 or 40 years ago, you'd hear in Colombia in 6 months.
That's right. You wouldn't be driving the news, you'd be getting it 6 months later.
Wow.
Tennis is the other area. So tennis in Ireland is a huge sport, hiding in plain sight, is a quote from the Tennis Ireland CEO, Kevin Quinn, former Leinster executive, and it's a piece by Peter O'Reilly in the Sunday Times as well. I was astonished by the numbers actually that were involved here.
Yeah, interesting, aren't they?
Yes.
He says 94,000 affiliated members for tennis in Ireland, but according to independent research, anywhere between 150 and 200,000 actually playing, and a bottleneck given the demand, and clubs are full. As a participation sport, tennis dwarfs rugby, for example. Those numbers are enormous.
Yeah. And if you read Conor Nyland's book, The Racket, it's a brilliant sports book.
Brilliant book.
And it's funny, I was talking to Conor Nyland last week. He's a very interesting fellow, and his life on the tour is very interesting. His father played fullback with Mayo, won a league medal in 1970. So he's come from the sort of traditional sporting backgrounds in Ireland, and there was various other sports involved. But like you, I was amazed when I read this piece by Peter O'Reilly with the numbers involved, the poor infrastructure there is for tennis in the country. And it does seem like one sport that needs an injection of finance to create more courts all over the country. And of course you have paddle.
Paddle, the intro is anyone for paddle, everyone for paddle, apparently, because people are making money from paddle. But that's the one that jumped out of me as well, Colm, is there's not a single indoor court in Munster.
That's amazing.
Which has turned out some of our best tennis players.
And you need clay. Clay is a better surface for developing technical skills.
Yeah, don't have it. It is a problem for us is facilities. We put a lot of money into GA facilities, obviously, but some sports really struggle with this. And this is written on the first of all, Kevin Quinn, who's now the CEO of Tennis Ireland. It's interesting. He comes from a rugby background. He comes from working on the commercial side with Leinster. So he's really interested in getting in here and getting money, because he said it's money they need, obviously. And what Nyland's book really brought home is you may have the talent, but if you don't have the money, if your family doesn't have money and you can't afford to go to all these places and and then you go off on the tour and you haven't got a coach with you, even how difficult it is. And Tommy Carson, obviously, went on the tour. Simon made such a brave fist of it for so long, but it's such a difficult thing for Irish kids to do because the money isn't there. And the Irish Open, this is one of the reasons why this piece is appearing today, is because the Irish Open starts this week. But the Irish Open, which has some status because it's what they call a 15K, that's the prize money, right? But the winners get 2,000 each compared to 3.3 million each for the Wimbledon champions. So this is the sort of gaps that you're talking about, and how to build an infrastructure for that, how to build then support. What interests me in this piece, it's a very interesting piece, I think, for anybody who's involved in what we call minority sports, or the smaller sports that don't have money, is what he says is what they've decided to do. And Nyland was quite critical of Tennis in Ireland in the book as well. And like a lot of track athletes, when I covered athletics, it's the same thing. They would say, we have to do our own thing because the federation don't do enough for us. There can be a disconnect because the federation are trying to grow grassroots as well as help the elites. But he does say something here which I think is interesting, because Athletics Ireland, I think, have got this now, which is, you can go away, but we will support you in every way possible we can, and we will work with your coaches. So he's saying, in the past, we probably said that to players. We said, you're either with us or against us, part of our programme or not. But he says, now we're building a database of all the performance players. We're looking to build relationships with tennis programmes in the US colleges. Yes. And that's the sort of thing that Athletics Ireland have done as well. And I've also say to athletes with their own coaches, look, whatever you need, whether you're in England or you're in America, wherever you are, if we can help you keep going where you are, we will give you that support. And I think that's changed, that centralised thing doesn't work for a lot of sports because we don't have the weather, we don't have the facilities, we don't have the you want to be a sprinter, you want to be in a warm country somewhere where you can train like Rashida Adeleke does. So it's a collaborative thing, and national governing bodies, it's difficult for them. It's very hard for them, but they have to find a way to make it work.
But Clíona, exactly the point. But it shines a light on the bigger issue here is the funding of sport in general in this country. Like, we're a rich country. We have an infrastructural deficit from our history compared to most other European countries. And the model of providing sports facilities has to change. Like, the GEA have done phenomenal work on their own because they have tapped into all the local communities and they've built phenomenal type of facilities, but like
we get good government money as well, Colm.
Good government money, yes, absolutely, and use it very wisely. But you need all the sort of local authorities, like they do in every other country, providing sports facilities, a rugby pitch, a soccer pitch, a football pitch, a tennis court, all there, all provided to the local communities. That hasn't happened in Ireland. That model. And that's part of the models of most European cities, and they work very well. First, the other big thing about it is it means that, in every football club, and I'm involved in Simonstown now, every week there's a draw to try and raise money for this. And the problem of running the teams, provide the facilities, is a massive drain. Whereas in reality, what you should be concentrating in is getting people playing
developing
sport.
Talent and developing
that the
coaches,
infrastructure is there for you, and you go out then and you do your recruiting and you run the sport, and not having to worry about a financial burden on top of you from year to year. And we're a rich country. We should be pouring millions and millions and millions into providing for all these minority sports.
Well, I've heard recent 1/3 and one first-hand example where, an inter-county chief executive, or whatever they're called these days, the prominent hurling county, struggling to, keep the show on the road from a commercial point of view, and that being the gig, in the main, as opposed to a lot of things that you're talking about in relation to the development of the sport. And also a recently retired or stood aside inter-county football manager who said very much the same thing, that most of their time was taken up by going off trying to unleash
funds,
commercial avenues, and like, that's wrong. Like,
no, that shouldn't be the job.
Absolutely.
And I suspect as well, I think in Ireland, I know we're a small country economically, I do suspect that sponsors in Ireland get sports sponsorship quite cheaply compared to other countries. Like they've got names and jerseys and things, and I often wonder, how much are you really putting in there, because it's so badly needed, And just one other thing about the tennis, that piece that Colm spotted very early this morning, he also says that one of the things they've done is try to develop junior talent, but he's saying now that they've over 100 internationally ranked juniors, and he said that hasn't happened before. So if you can get them going at that level, it's then is this difficult jump then to make in terms of coaches and facilities and everything else to take them on to the senior level. It was a very interesting piece.
Yeah, I'm not sure we take sport seriously in this country, to be absolutely honest, from a governmental level.
Yeah, well, we don't have a singular minister for sport. Correct. You see, it's always a joint thing. Yeah,
it's a whole other conversation. Alexander Isak was another name that shocked us all.
Speaking of money,
600 grand a week for Tennis Ireland would go a long way.
Well, when you think about the fellas playing in the All-Ireland final today, like if some of them earn 600,000 in their careers, they'll probably be doing quite well. And I'm not one of these GEA fellas who say, aren't we great because fellas are doing it for nothing? But because we do it, because we want to do it. Nobody twists their arms to do it, and there's great enjoyment, and you get so many great benefits in health and friendships. People talk about and say about medals won and things like that. I really think and I know may sound a little bit trite to say, I think they're irrelevant as you get older. They become increasingly irrelevant with me anyway. And the most important part is the memories and the friendships and things like that, not the winning or the losing or anything else. And I was trying to explain this, and there was a crowd of us one night, and we were all talking about this, and I said, it doesn't mean that much that you have won an All-Ireland. Okay, you're part of an elite group in some respect. But I said, you know, the good that you do is more important than that. And a Mayo fella said to me, "That's all right for you to say that." So that was an aside.
But that Scotty Scheffler thing almost of, you know, what's it all about?
What's it all about?
Yeah, it's all about, like, it's the competition on the day, which I found to be the biggest thing. When it was over, it was an anticlimax. And like, I remember we sat after the All-Ireland. I always remember there was some sort of a function after the match across the road in Croke Park, and we were after winning the All-Ireland. And we went across the road and we were sitting around together and we were having a drink. And somebody said, "Is that what it is? Is that it? Is that it?" And then somebody said, "What are we going to do now?" And then somebody else said, "Sure, maybe we'll try and win it next year." And that was about it. It wasn't any sort of massive joy or that it was going to change your life or anything like that, you know.
I think it's the physical challenge. It's the physical challenge of bettering an opponent and winning a game. But like tonight, you would say whoever wins the All-Ireland today, like the tip hurlers in the past week, what they will remember, there's euphoria at the end, and there's all of that. And it's weird in the J where you get the medals, like whatever it is, you know, 6 months later still. But it'll be what happens with your mates in the week that follows. And that's what you're saying, isn't it, Colm, really, in the years that follow.
Yeah, and again, if we go back to Isaac, it's just the sort of grotesque type of money that's involved in fellas going to Saudi Arabia and the Qataris and all the different groups who've taken over. Again, I hark back to the days when you had soccer being owned by normal people. Now, a lot of the time they were exploiting, up until the 60s, they were exploiting the players as well. Now it's probably gone completely the other way. And Isaac, you know...
And you've agents in the middle of it.
Yeah, and there's no loyalty. There's no loyalty about it at all. Yeah. Even though I still enjoy the big games. I enjoy Paris Saint-Germain winning this year with a sort of a low-key squad. When, you know, they got rid of Mbappe, they got rid of Neymar, got rid of all the big name players, and to put together a proper team. And that was nice to see as well.
It's probably not what Jimmy Hill had in mind when he changed this entire...
There's a load of pieces on Isaac, obviously, because he's in the news and, you know, the whole where he wants to go and all of that. So that's covered across the papers. But there's also a good piece in the Sunday Times, and Jonathan Norcroft always does a piece with a little bit more analysis, nice. But his piece is, acquire the best strikers from Scandinavia. Why are the Norwegians and the Swedes and these producing players who can score goals and are strikers and take people on? And it's just, it's a great line.
Wasn't penalty takers from Sweden.
Well, yeah, exactly. Not last week, that's for sure. But he used that great line. He's saying, how are they developing players with main character energy? You know what I mean? The likes of Haaland and that, who even when they lose their streak will still go for it. So it's just a really interesting piece. It's so complicated, I won't even go into it, but definitely it's about the systems, it's about how long they stay in the system, but also it's about this. He said, from talking to different coaches and that in Scandinavia, it's this belief that he's saying there's a belief in England, he said, gradually now, that what's happening is the Pepperization of the game, basically, that the coaches are trying to train young fellas to play in systems, but not to take a player on and beat him, because there's more jeopardy in that. But he's saying in Scandinavia, that's still valued more, and the system is more to develop them as those kind of players. So it's well worth reading. It's a very interesting piece, I think, particularly if you're a coach.
Yeah, Jim McGuinness has changed the pep philosophy of Gaelic football, thankfully, you know, because it was safety first all the time the last few years. Now he's saying, go for it, lads.
Yeah. We'll see again.
I think Jack O'Connor equally is doing the same thing with the long.
One last piece to mention here, and by all means you can tip the cap to any other pieces that we've missed along the way in the next couple of minutes. But in the Sunday Independent, Conor McKeown, Ireland must not send teams to play in Israel. Decision making has to protect a group of young players. So he says, you know, Ireland's women's basketball team are currently assessing their next steps, in quotes, having been drawn against Israel for their next Eurobasket 27 qualifying campaign, and necessitating an away game on November the 18th. And I think it's best summed up by his last couple of paragraphs where he says some big calls to made this week. Basketball Ireland said it would be liaising with players, coaching staff, Sport Ireland, the government and other stakeholders over the coming days. Conor McKeown says the organisation expects to provide an update on the situation this week. Bottom line, he says, Ireland should not be sending representative teams to play sport in Israel. He says its decision-making process must prioritise protecting a group of young players who've already been exposed to intense political scrutiny once from the same unwanted situation. So, and
I've said it before here, and you know my feeling on it. I think Israel should be banned from international sport at the moment by all sporting organisations, and it's time somebody took a stand on this. And if Basketball Ireland have to pull the team out of this competition, and they were threatened the last time with 80,000 fines, if that happens, and if that's so, the Irish government should be paying that fine, not Basketball Ireland, in my opinion, because the government is clear now, and our Taoiseach is clear on where we stand on the Israel genocide, as far as I'm concerned. But I do think it shouldn't be on Basketball Ireland, and it shouldn't be on these players. They were really badly affected last time for getting criticism for playing against Israel.
It's unfair, isn't it?
It was so unfair on them, and particularly, again, they're not a sport that gets huge support and gets huge support from government or from fans, and suddenly they were caught in this awful situation. And I know they were affected deeply by the players. So I think it'd be really important that Basketball Ireland make a decision here. If they have to make a hard decision here, they're supported by government, and if there are fines and there are any threats to them, let somebody else take that on as well.
Yeah, well, I agree with you fully, Clíona. It's a stain on the world, what has happened, the monstrosity of what has been happening, and a sort of genocide. And in fairness, there's been a lot of Irish people who stood up. David Hickey on the GAA side has been very active in campaigning there, and he keeps it up week after week after week. And basketball have an opportunity to make a stand. Everybody should support them. Conor McKeown is quite right in shining a light on this. Yeah. But how the world can stand by and allow this to continue is just disgrace.
Yeah, hear, hear. Conor McKeown, consistently brilliant writer, and one of the few to address that topic today. So, good piece in the Sunday Independent. We're going to leave it there because we're bang out of time, but thoroughly enjoyed that, Colm O'Rourke, and your debut. Pretty good debut. If we knock another 55 years out of you now, we'll be we'll have you back again. Thanks a million for coming in and enjoy the game today.
I really enjoyed it.
You're going Kerry, and given what you said earlier on, you're going Donegal, I presume, are you?
No, I'm actually going Kerry as well.
Kerry, right.
I'm going Kerry as well.
We could be either all right or all wrong. Adrian, who are you going for?
I am going Kerry slightly, but we'll all look like mugs come this evening. But I am looking forward to it, and down in a bit. Thanks a million for coming in, Clíona Foley. Thanks as always.
The Sunday Paper Review
on Off the Ball,
brought to you by Dove Men Plus Care, proud sponsors of the British and Irish Lions. Upgrade to Dove Men Plus Care, because care changes everything.